Hi, everyone, and welcome to the new live chat about the book, The Future of Health. Let me, first of all, welcome Tanja Dowe, CEO of the Debiopharm Innovation Fund. Hi, Tanja.
Hello, Roberto.
And welcome also to Kristin Milburn. Kristin is Managing Director of Healthware Labs, the innovation unit within Healthware Group. Welcome, Kristin.
Hello, good to see you guys.
So it's great to have you both here. And one great thing about these live chats is that we spent this 30 minutes together with friends. Can I say friends and fellow experts within the digital health ecosystem. As you know, this is the third time we do it that have contributed as guests to the book The Future of Health that was published by Wiley globally now 3 weeks ago. So just as a reminder how this works, there's 30 minutes of very informal conversation around the topics of the book and with guests that have contributed with their own perspectives to the book itself. And before starting, I would like Tanja first and then Kristin to give a little bit of background about what they do in their respective roles that I believe will be beneficial also for all those entrepreneurs and even leaders from corporates that are watching the live or the recording. So Tanja, you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone on the other side of the screen. My name is Tanja Dowe. I'm the CEO of Debiopharm Innovation Fund. We invest in digital health in two areas. How do we help cancer patients beyond the pill? It's a classical. And also, how do we become a better pharma developers? How do we change the way we do R&D? Because we can't go on like this. We're a typical Series A investor, so we invest 3 to 5 million tickets, and we're based out of Switzerland, Lausanne, by the beautiful mountains where we just got a snowfall of about 45 centimeters today.
Wow. Amazing.
Kristin.
Hi, as Roberto said, my name is Kristin Milburn, and I head up the Healthware Labs division of Healthware Group, which is the digital health innovation group. I think, my background, having spent about 20 plus years in digital consulting, then spending time inside a large pharma at Novartis in their digital medicines team, and then spending time at a digital health startup called Headspace. I think I have a unique vantage point that I bring to my job, which is helping corporates, in most cases biopharma, understand how to partner with startups and how that can help enhance innovation in a multitude of ways, and to help incumbents, large pharma or payers, understand the landscape and understand how to integrate those new ways of interacting with patients into their business models.
Thank you, Kristin. So both of you contributed to the chapter called Open Innovation and Partnerships. And as always do, I show the picture here, and that's the Tanja article. Tanja, we know that this concept of open innovation is not new to pharma industry, because essentially pharmaceutical companies started with open innovation, many decades ago. The whole notion of scouting molecules and cooperating with others to develop, and then maybe licensing out, and then partnering in different stage of the development, but also the technology transfer from academia. That's open innovation, right?
Absolutely.
And then it's like this paused a little bit for a certain amount of time when it came to digital. And a few years ago, I believe collectively, we kind of rediscovered, right, in the pharmaceutical space, this concept of open innovation. And in the first years, I was like amazed that it was seemed as new to an industry that almost invented, in a way, the process itself. Maybe, of course, I'm not calling it that way. And so that chapter of the book is about this, is about how this maybe sometimes surprising places where innovation thrives, and now essentially innovation can come from any place, can go to maybe different directions, and these organizations, typically big ones, should be like interconnected with the number of other players to exchange essentially innovation. And your contribution at two focus. One is titled "Innovations Will Take Place in a Sharing Ecosystem." So maybe would you like to articulate your own notion, and potentially, I believe, also part of the investment thesis, about how you see those ecosystems, and maybe specifically those that you kind of cultivate as part of the Vision Fund, process.
Right. And I think that what you said is really wonderful, because pharmaceutical industry really invented this open innovation, taking innovations from academia, in licensing and developing and out licensing, and this whole is a good example of ecosystem and open innovation. However, pharma got they're very good at that. But when we talk about digital transition of an industry, now they're not in licensing and developing digital technologies. They're more it's more in the structures of the pharma industry to change the way they work, and it's different. It's different. You have to kind of you have a vertical integration, and now all of a sudden you're in a completely different dimension, doing expansion and learning new things. So we really needed to kind of refocus and not reinvent, but reorganize how we develop ourselves, how we learn to work in a digital world. And from Debiopharm's perspective, this thought on, okay, we invest in digital health companies, because they bring new ideas. We participate in building that future, but we also learn and can help the startup companies learn about pharma industry. When I look at startup companies, very often we have a company that has a great idea from technology perspective, and they tell in the meeting to pharma executives what they're doing. And they think that the pharma understands what they're doing. And on the other side, there's pharma who thinks that these startups understand what is the pharma need. But there's a lot of conversation needed, a lot of education on both sides, and trying to understand each other. This is extremely important. So we've really we look in these two areas: patient journey and development of pharmaceutical R&D in kind of digitally enabled ways. And we're trying to build our portfolio so that we have kind of a group of companies on both sides. And together we realize that these companies are almost starting to develop a mini ecosystem where, you can connect the dots. And each startup company usually starts, especially in Series A, from a very point solution in one area. And we need to expand that to more platform kind of thinking. But I think it's unrealistic to think that there's a startup that solves a huge platform issue. It's more about putting these startups together to form some sort of continue. And I'm talking here and I'm thinking, what was the other question you talked about? Yes, the sharing ecosystem. So we're also thinking, I have 2 teenage children that really let me know how ancient I am on a continuous basis. So I'm also looking at, how they look at the world, having been digital natives, and really they don't understand the old ways. Why wouldn't they have access to their information? Why wouldn't they decide who has access to their information? And then they are all about sharing. It's all about crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. So people in the future generations are much more, inherently in this digital sharing economy. And we need to understand that, because if we want to be here in 20 years, 10, 20 years, 30 years as a pharma company, we need to try to understand, how do we serve that future?
Understood. No, that's a great point. And let me just, Kristin, before I get to you, you wrote at some point, so here you have an involved health consumer and data like you never had before. So how does pharma innovate in this ecosystem? This is exactly, coming from your part of the book. And one other thing, so that will be a transition to Kristin. I like that at some point you wrote something like, it's not like innovating through endless pilotitis, which I found quite interesting. And so, Kristin, given you do a lot of work into this intersection, right? And Tanja also talked about the need of understanding probably not only priorities, but even way of working on both sides. Maybe, what's your take on that? Is there any learning that is emerging as a good way to make this function? Because honestly, it looks like very important for these two sides of the ecosystem to connect profitably together.
A few things come to mind when Tanja was talking. The first is, the spirit of discovery that is so alive and well in pharma, and always has been. It's like the core of those companies. I don't think that spirit of discovery and willingness to risk and try new things and try new molecules is quite there with digital yet at pharma. They're just, when pharma, big pharma wants to partner with it, they want everything figured out. They want it to be perfectly clear. They want to have an RCT. They want everything buttoned up and proven. And it's like the spirit of discovery is like, they expect it to be already figured out. And so I feel like they need to kind of bring some of that discovery that way of being as a company to the digital realm. And, the other thing about point solutions versus platforms, I think that does hurt pharma, because when you have a big pharma and you have different therapeutic areas and different franchises being managed independently, excuse me, with, different budgets, a lot of times they'll experiment with a solution, one franchise, and the franchise over here, a year later will also do that, and none of those learnings are shared. So, developing some kind of a way to connect the dots throughout an organization and to, enhance those learnings, because it really is all about change management at the end of the day, right? And I think, and that is hard at very large companies. And so that is something that we've found really just to start sharing and letting others within the company and throughout the world, because most of these companies are global. We see a lot of amazing pilots happening in, Eastern Europe or, in Asia. And, then you have the teams in the EU and the US that may not even be aware of those. And that's how innovation is fueled, right? It's by learning what worked in China, leveraging WeChat and how that could be, thought about in another region. And then, like Tanja said, thinking about it more from a platform perspective versus just point solutions. Because another thing is, a lot of times, there's like this narrow thinking about a startup. If they're just focused on, let's say, diabetes, of course, you can take some of those learnings from one therapeutic area and extend it to other therapeutic areas if you've learned how to engage the customer, the patient, because user engagement is what makes digital solutions work, right? And so it's not about the specific therapeutic area, but of course you need to understand truly what the patient needs are and build a solution that addresses those, which will create that user engagement. Then you can expand to other therapeutic areas and build more of a platform approach.
Great. Tanja, coming back to you, I have a curiosity around the investment strategy, but not really when you get into the companies, but more, I would say, medium to long term. So let me make an example here. So it's the focus is pretty clear, and the fact that you are in a round, focused fund, it's very clear too. So what's your typical hope from a corporate perspective when you do one of these investments? Because of course, you're not a standalone fund, so you have, of course, a financial return goal, but also you have I believe potentially a more industrial strategic, objective. It's planned to probably acquire some of those companies, or so how you, I'm very curious how you balance these two sides between the financial and the strategic, so to speak.
Well, we have the luxury of not being a acquisition pipeline. So we are not attempting to acquire those companies. We're not attempting to turn into a digital developer ourselves. Or maybe we will one day, you never know, but it's not really to acquire companies. We have two goals. We have to have return on investment on financial side and learning side. And how do we measure learning? Is basically when we invest in a company, we do an introduction because the fund is a separate entity, separate company. So we make an introduction with the pharma company, and we kind of tell them that, you should talk with these guys, the startup. We have a meet the startup day at Debiopharm. They come over, they present themselves. We put them together with experts. It's a kind of two-way road. We ask the startup, who do you want to talk to learn maybe about your customers, or learn about regulatory, or ask for some opinions. And then we ask our guys, so, who would like to explore what these guys are doing, or whether you could use them. And we try to kind of make that two-way street. We've figured out our measurement of success is that within 2 years from the investment, there's maybe a collaboration or something tangible that we can show that something has, clicked on our side. We are maybe considering real world data arms in a different way. We've learned something about regulation because we helped the startup company and so on. So it's difficult to measure, but it is really a learning fund. We are not learning to in order to kind of do the similar thing later ourselves, but we're learning because we want to be in the forefront of innovation. We want to be one of the first early adopters of these technologies, because Debiopharm is a kind of a small pharma/biotech company where we are still very entrepreneurial, very agile, but big enough to do big projects, big programs, and develop drugs and use technologies. We want to maintain our competitiveness by being one of the early adopters of these technologies. So this is really important for us. We've published the collaborations that we've done with BC Platforms, with Kaiku Health, with Nuclei, and so there's many more cooking. This is really what we do. So far so good. I think change resistance, as Kristin mentioned, comes very much from the traditional pharma. You take risk with the asset, and it is so risky. The whole development, clinical trials, it's very risky business. So you try to mitigate risk to the max, and then you also kind of mitigate the risk by minimizing the new kind of moving parts in your equation. And this is something, but it's not. It's not the type of change resistance that stems from just being lazy and not wanting to learn. It is an educational process to figure out how can we use these technologies and still keep the risks at some sort of a control.
Yeah, no, that's great. And of course, I've been following a few of these initiatives, and clearly. That is a great way to have this early access to new ways of doing things. Sometimes it's probably, in my observation, both a technology innovation, but sometimes it's also a way of thinking, creativity, the way you kind of organize things, which it's almost like comes relatively more natural to a startup environment rather than an established company. Because of course also kind of KPIs are different. Tanja, real quick, because before going back to Kristin, as always, this 30 minutes kind of time flies. You have been recently at Frontiers Health earlier in kind of mid-November, and there was this breakout. You got your Series A, now what, right? Which has also been published as I would say content, kind of after the conference, besides being available now for playback since a few days. I think this is very relevant because probably before that level of funding, with few exceptions, companies are probably still too small and too less developed to really partner. I'm starting to think that is the time around the Series A where you can really move from a pure POC to something that is kind of more meaningful. So if you should kind of extract a few bullet points about this concept of you got the Series A's, now what? Which one would you pick?
Right. So this is. First of all, the reason we wrote this paper is also because we're thinking, we're trying to be creative about how do we co-create this world? How do we build this future. And if we learn something on the way, we're going to publish it so that we can help other CEOs and other companies figure out how to build their companies after they get Series A. There's so many things that the companies that we invest in have in common. And very often, Series A, you have your proof of concept. And then you have to kind of develop the company to proof of scalability, because you have something that works, some early customers, but very often there's a way there before you get to that hockey stick kind of curve where you still need to develop things. And it's a very unique stage of company. The CEOs have to be creative, adaptive, and so on. I think that some of those what I would say the bullets of learning what are how the CEO has changed from being in the front line, talking with those pilot customers, those big customers, and being very close to them, and kind of turn that relationship into to other people's hands, and that requires quite a good social skill set to the pharma companies early on, they call the CEO when they press the wrong button, but after you start growing, you can't be that close to the customer. So that's a very important step. How do you build that? The other one is when you build your team, and very often we see startup companies going from like 17 people to 65 in less than a year. How do you ensure that what the people that are delivering, that are developing the future offering, hiring new people, training them, how can that group of, and very often it's middle management that has a huge pressure in startup companies, how do you ensure that you can grow up without blowing up in the middle? So I think those are really some interesting observations from that work.
Absolutely. No, that's super important. And later we'll republish this one, or share links about that paper. And of course, the full session is available for playback. Kristin, with an eye to the time, because we're quickly approaching the end of the live chat for today. So building on what Tanja described, clearly that phase is almost moving from a team that is working on a project into starting to become a company in a nutshell, and that goes through many different iterations. And you have seen, of course, both externally and internally, companies really kind of scaling from a tiny startup on to. So I'll ask you maybe a slightly difficult question, but these live chats are like this. We just go where the discussion goes. You think a startup that starts to raise, say, in the tens of millions and crosses like hundreds of people, can stay as such, so stay a startup, with the capital S, so with that mentality, mindset, because of course, the risk to become a small corporate and being in the middle, so no longer a proper scale up and not yet an established corporation, which of course has its own strength, it's pretty challenging. So
I could answer. I think it's so interesting. CEOs at the start of a company are interviewing every single person that they hire. They're meeting with them on one-on-one, and then when they get to a certain size, they see new faces, and they learn about new people joining when they get the company newsletter that has their face. And I think the most important thing is their second level. So they need to be hands-on to hire the people that know the things that they don't know, which I know is something Frederick de Bong said on the panel with Tanja. You need to hire for the skills you don't have, right? And you need to hire, and at that level, right below the C-suite, like the C-suite level and maybe one layer below, you need to hire for the spirit of the EQ, not just the skill set, right? You need to hire for the passion and the spirit of the company that you want to bring. Because at that point, you need to be able to delegate to them to hire people to keep that spirit going. So, I mean, the culture aspect is not to be dismissed. I mean, it's a huge struggle and challenge for a company as they scale to keep that culture alive. And it's very hard for the CEO to kind of pull away from being hands-on so early on. And so I think the only way that they can mitigate that risk is to make sure that the people they're hiring, they trust 100%, and that they have the spirit and the EQ needed to, that they feel they're in good hands, and being able to delegate.
So the human factor, the team, keeps being a key factor also at that stage. Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I think that there's also at some point something that needs to be figured out, because the certain processes probably started to be more say organized, and adapted to the sites. But I think we know a lot about how to start a company at this point after a few years of different processes and different and quite a bit of experience, and we know quite a bit, of course, about to run like large corporations. I think, relatively speaking, that the experience, the collective experience out there in the scale-up phase, because of course, it's about a much smaller number of companies, is not crystallized, that much yet. So, and I see in working with entrepreneurs, there are a lot of questions of when is the right time to have certain functions added to the mix, and so on and so forth, which is, I think, still quite a learning curve. And that's why I think, Tanja, taking the time and the focus to participate into conferences, writing about the experiencing, sharing, I think this is very, very important for the ecosystem, because as also came up last week, I think we are, of course, few years into this digital health transformation, but we are still very much in the beginning of how this will really transform healthcare on a global level. We were discussing with Unity last week that we feel like we are at the beginning of a phase 2, but still at the beginning. And so probably sharing those learnings will be very, very important. So I think that's very important to keep doing and keep sharing those learnings, even companies to companies. I have to say, when I see CEOs of companies that now are worth close to unicorn status, coming back and keynoting to the younger entrepreneurs or those kind of earlier in the journey, I think there is a lot of credit to that, because it's about really helping the ecosystem to thrive. As always, when discussions are interesting, we're already over time, so it's already like 2-3 minutes over. As a reminder, all these chats are available for playback on all the various channels, and in reposting we'll also point to documents and other videos like this white paper that has been published, so that anyone will be able to connect dots. So kind of watch for the post about this playback, and we'll add those links there. Maybe just any final remarks, as always we do, both Tanja and Kristin, that you would like to share, and then we'll close for today.
I realize that my neighbor has started drilling. I apologize for the noise in the background. So I will say very quickly, thank you so much for this discussion. I truly think that we need to think beyond what we have today and changing what we're changing today. We need to think about how will the future look like, and then develop solutions for that, and not focus on barriers of today, but think about the opportunities of tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanja. Kristin.
Yeah, I would say, I think there's this tendency of people to think someone else has all the answers. But as with digital transformation, everything is happening so fast that all of us are learning and all of us are trying. So I think just keeping that spirit of discovery and, not being afraid to take a risk and to use your experience to, think about a current situation and not be afraid to take a stand on something, and not assume someone else has all the answers.
Great. Kristin, Tanja, thank you so much for spending this time with me and everyone that is watching on this Friday end of afternoon. This has become now a kind of recurrent occasion, and I'm getting messages that is and I thank you everyone that is messaging. That is a very nice way to wrap the week with this kind of ideas and dialogues. So we'll come back again next Friday. And so again, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next occasion. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.